So we finally got our new ride.
I just wanted you to know.
As some of you may have seen on our Instagram, we had a Volkswagen Golf GTI Mark V and the chain broke. So then we got a replacement, got something a bit more luxurious this time, a bit more old-fashioned, and let me show you around. Come. Let's get the desirable Style 32 BMW sport rims, and they were included in the sports pack, which includes the black trim around the windows, and this ride is slightly lower, maybe some other small things which I don't know. Yes, steering wheel, and I think that's about it. And in there we've got our little team dog looking at what we're doing here. So the neutral side is the color. I was first thinking we're gonna redo the whole thing in some kind of wrap or a plasti dip in white or more contemporary color like that, but I actually grew to really like it, so that's gonna stay. This is called Aspen Silver, and it's a silver with a purple tone in it. Now the downsides. If you can see there in the bumper, the big dent, then the other downsides are especially visible from the front. This is a pre-facelift. That means we get the old style headlights, the old style grille, the old style bumper with the big fog lights, and it all just looks a bit dated now. Both doors are dented. The same bumper that's dented on the other side is hanging loose on this side. The headlight is coming out. The headlight trim is loose and broken. And then on the rear we've got the pre-facelift bumper, which is not that bad actually, and the pre-facelift lights, which are also not that bad, apart from, as you can see, the indicators are orange or amber or yellow, depending on where you come from and how you say it. To look for some inspiration for a new beast, we went ahead and had a look at the new Golf GTI Club Sport. Yes, the love never died. Here we go. On the exterior of modern cars, you see a lot of jewelry. What do I mean with jewelry? Well, take a look at those vents, for example, on the front bumper, or the design of the headlights. There's a lot more accessories, jewelry on the outside of modern cars. Come take a look at the headlights, for example. So on a lot of new cars, there's design in everything. As you can see in this headlight of the Club Sport GTI, I think of every GTI, you have the red striping, we have LED rings around the projectors, then there's an aluminium look cap on top of the projector, and if you come around to the bumper, you can see shiny black trim pieces around intakes. Here's an actual functional sort of an air ram in the grille, on the splitter, and it's all looking very accessorized, and it's all looking like the car is wearing the jewelry. Come, let's take a look at the back. Another feature of new cars is that everything is more pronounced. Take a look at the spoiler. It stands out from the design. It's its own design feature. Then take a look at the diffuser down there. Not only is it coming across the whole car, it has actually 2 layers. And again, it's in the piano black from the design theme. And then there's LED everything. If I open the car here, you can see the indicator lights are LED, the tail lights are actually also LED. So a lot of the light that was in bulbs has been replaced by LED, and just gives it that more pronounced accessorized look. Right, to the workshop, and let's see what we can do with our E39. So I want to make this look the best it can, and to me that means I want to make it look like the coolest cars that were on the road when I was young. A millennial's dream, sort of. Of course you have to start with the right car in the right color, right? So what I mean with the right car is a car with a more timeless design, something like a C5 Audi A6 or E46 BMW 3 Series, or if you're a bit more upmarket, the 993 Porsche 911, or this E39 BMW 5 Series. And in the right color, I mean something that will stay timeless as well. Something maybe something like silver, gray, black, white, you know, the cool colors. However, they're not cool because you see them all the time, and that's why I decided to keep this rather magnificent purple pearlescent silver that we have here. At first I really didn't like it, as I said before, but I think changing it to white will, it won't stand out. What it also means is to make it look sort of like new, factory new. And what does that mean to me? At least it means that it's clean and in good condition. So the very first step before all modifications is to give your car good clean and detail. Actually, I think I didn't put the water on. After the dirt was cleaned out of every nook and cranny, the car was thoroughly rinsed off. So after the wash, it would be the ideal moment to give it a detail, and we were going to do that too. We're going to detail it to make it look as fresh as possible. So normally you would go ahead and clay and polish the car at this moment, but as you can see, this car and the paint is so well taken care of that's not necessary. So we're going to skip straight to the waxing. So if you got any damaged panels on the car, don't wax those, and stay tuned to see why. So before the waxing, I'm just going to dry off the car with a clean microfiber towel. So why would someone wash a whole car and not do the wheels? Comical, no? Nicely done. Just a few finishing touches and then the car was looking magnificent. And so the second step, and this is why not to wax the damaged parts, is to get the car into a good condition. And we are very lucky in this case because all of the damage is concentrated right beneath the door trim, and that means we don't have to repaint the whole door, and we can just mask it off from this trim upwards and repair the bottom. Now, interesting point is repairing versus replacing, and I'm not replacing the doors in this case because first of all the damage is only very small, it concentrates in this area here, and secondly, like I just mentioned, it's an easy repair just to the bottom, and thirdly, where was I? Exactly. Another point is that if I were to do this alone and I'm going to replace the doors, then trying to juggle it in and getting it properly aligned will be a nightmare. So I think it's much better just to repair this, and the doors are aligned from factory. They didn't actually get damaged in the way that they're misaligned, and so I don't want to go through the trouble of getting it aligned myself. And the last point that I want to make is the cost. You out there just like me are car freaks and have a garage full of paints and fillers and so forth, so the cost will be much cheaper. I actually did find these two doors on eBay in the correct color and for a sedan for I think a total of 90 euro, and I only paid 25 for the paint. So that's a thing to consider. Yeah, and so the 90 euro didn't even include shipping. And if I'm going to use some of the things I had in the garage and just fix this, I think it will cost a total of 40 euro. So the doors that I found on eBay were also without door cards, so I'd have to replace those from these doors, which is a lot of work. And something I found also when you're doing it either the first time or on your own, getting a door trim to sit right on the inside also a challenge, and they were chrome lined, not shadow lined, so I'd have to somehow replace the window frame, and so it's a huge nightmare. So repairing, not replacing. Lovely, no? When you're taking off trim on the outside of the car, please don't use a screwdriver, because what's going to happen is you're going to pry in and you're going to make micro scratches or deep scratches, even worse, into your paint, and you're going to cause a rust spot and you'll be very unhappy. So therefore you get one of your upholstery clip remover tools, as this one says, and you keep one aside for the outside. As you can see, this one is nice and dirty and is only used on the outside of the car, and you use this because it's a soft edged plastic, and you come in and you start prying off your, oh, look how easy that was. And you start prying off your door trim without making scratches, without damaging the trim too badly. And you do have to be careful because the trim is actually quite easy to bend. So when you come in, you have to just squeeze it ever so tightly so that it comes popping out. As you can see, which I'm not doing here correctly. Because we have just some scratches on the top of the door, I should have shaken this. I'm going to attempt just to polish them and see how that goes. Ah! And then you simply buff that away. Fold it over and give it a final wipe. Lovely. Now, the unfortunate thing is that there are actually some deeper scratches that I will not be able to get out like this. I think repainting the whole door for it is also stupid, so I think we're gonna leave it like this, and if one day a opportunity comes up to maybe get them professionally detailed, wet sand it, and then like polished out, I'll go for that. But for now, this looks fine to me. I've got the majority of the scratches out, so on to the bottom part. Right? Yeah. It's rolling. Rolling, 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 rolling. So next up is the business of the preparation. You know what they say, preparation is everything. When you're doing paint. So, this is not recommended, by the way. Getting the glue of your tape in your mouth because you're cutting it with your teeth. So that's only for idiots like me. Yeah, you want to tape off the panels that you don't want to paint. As you can see, very nicely done, sir. Okay. Oh yes, another thing is that you will probably have the door open to also paint the edges, right? And so if, like us, your project car has been standing for a little bit, your battery might be getting low. And the weather is insane. And when you have the door open, in some cars you can't switch off the interior light. So I'd recommend to put the battery charger on. Unless you like jumping a car, or, I don't know, something silly like that. So because we got some quite deep scratches here, we'll have to take a quite rough sandpaper. This one here is a 180 grit to smooth out those scratches. So with your sanding block, you just go along and try not to go too deep, just to equalize the scratches. When you've got an area that is so beaten up that with the sanding block you're not touching any of the surface, just the high spots, this is where you want to use your just your finger and try to get into all of the last surfaces. Now you should avoid, unlike we're doing here, going down to the bare metal, because the factory paint and its layers is what is protecting your panels from rusting. So even though most fillers will say to take it down to bare metal and then apply it to the bare metal, I would avoid that, because like I said, the factory paint is nowadays so good that it protects the panels from rusting, and to avoid any rust you should not take it down to bare metal again. However, here we had no choice, so we're just going to apply the filler over that like it says on the box, and then use the primer on top of that again. So before you apply any paint or filler, you take your panel wipe, don't put it next to the heater, and you rub off all the grease, the dust, wax, dirt. All these things have to be removed prior to any work on the panels. Alright, lovely. And then finally, with your clean wipe, just wipe that down to be sure you got every last speck of dust, because if there's some dust or grease in between the panel and your filler or paint, it's not going to stick and bond correctly, and it's going to just come off, and that's not what we want. Ooh. So you probably all know the expression to take a filler amount of a golf ball for the filler and P for the hardener, P size. However, you should always read what's on the label. This one says 2%. But that much, I think. If you put too much, it's gonna harden before you even put it on. If you don't put enough, it's never gonna harden. So, have to be a little bit careful with it. And once you've done it a few times, you can already feel during the mixing if you've got enough in it or not. And this feels like there's just a little bit missing, so I'm gonna add a bit more. So you take your flexible applicator and you just start smoothing it on. So my desired end result is not to have this looking like new, but to have it looking neat. Exactly, like a little bit stiffer than how it comes out of the box, right? Mm-hmm. But it shouldn't go hard on you whilst you're mixing. Then you know you put too much, and you might be able to save it with putting a bit more, or you just have to throw it away. Because if you put too much and you just put it on, there's a chance that it will later just explode. Yeah, it will just come off in ugly pieces. So when you live in a bit of a colder climate, it's best to take a heater, not a heat gun, but just a heater, and put it on the filler. Because when you put a heat gun, you might activate it too fast and it will explode the filler. And with the heater, you have a nice constant source of medium warmth, and it will fix your filler and become like this. So when it's dry, you can take something like a 240 grit if you've done as good of a job as I have, or maybe a 400 if you've done a proper job, and you can test if it's dry with your nail. If you can't push your nail in anymore, it's pretty much good to go. And then you just, with your sanding block, very important, you smooth it out. If you don't have a sanding block and you just paint it with your hand, and then later on you look in the light on the paint and you see these grooves, and these grooves are the areas where you're touching with your finger onto where you're sanding, and you're actually making grooves into the, how's this called, filler, and not sanding it smooth and flat. After you've sanded it smooth, you take your finishing filler and a little bit less flexible application pad, and you start working in the low spots with your finishing filler. And what this will do is make it a lot easier to smooth it out later. So yesterday night I added a final layer over the finishing filler to get it to be all smoothed out. As you can see, and what I was trying to also tell you yesterday, the panel will stay wavy. I mean, I didn't straighten the metal part on the inside. And as I was trying to explain yesterday, it's for me, it's a lot nicer looking at fresh paint, even though it's over a wavy panel, than at the panel that's all beat up and scratched. So anyway, but I believe that this will make it look much nicer when we're done. So let's go ahead and sand it down again. When you're working over several days and your car is outside, or even if it's in a moist garage, for example, paint some of the edges that you scuffed or sanded, because if you go down to the bare metal and just leave it, then you're bound to have rust later on. I'm just gonna give it the last or another wipe before I put on the last layer of finishing filler. Got it looking pretty clean and tidy, and then it's time to put on the primer. Like I was saying before, this is going to be a kind of a budget operation, so we're going to use rattle cans to apply the paint, and there are different manners to apply it. So you can either blend it in. What that means is you sort of go up to where the good bit of the panel is and you sort of blend it into the good bit, or you repaint the whole surface of the panel that you're working on, or in this case half of it. And that's what we're going to do, because we have the kind of up-down separation. I think it would look nicer and would blend in better with the rest of the panel if it was done as a whole on the bottom, and then you wouldn't see that it's only here, this part of the door, that is slightly different to the rest. So we're going to do the whole bottom, then it looks like one part, and then the top looks like the real deal, if you know what I mean, and it's going to look nicer as a whole. Now, to do this, you take a 600 and then 800 grit sanding paper, and you go lightly over the whole panel, and you give a once over over the filler just to finish it off, and then you start with the primer. So like I said, we're gonna do this with the spray can. Now my top tip is, when you've done any kind of repair or filler job, is to get some kind of filler spray to finish it off. The filler spray is gonna find those little imperfections, not the big ones, you're gonna have to do this with the real filler, but the little imperfections, and just smooth those out, and it's gonna make the job much nicer. And my second tip is to get one of these. These click onto the sprayer, and then you have control like this, and it's much easier to get the long flowing lines. Perfetto. First layer, you want to use just a grey primer, or any kind of primer, as close to your base color as possible maybe. And use that as and use that as the first layer, because this one is actually the one that etches into either your layer of paint that's underneath, or filler, or anything like that, and will give it a very strong layer of adhesion. So we're gonna warm it up a bit, because it's fairly cold out. And so with long flowing lines, start putting down the primer. After about 5 or 10 minutes, when the primer is tacked off, the filler spray can go on. Time for the base coat. And so the last step is the clear varnish, and You also want to heat this one up if you live in a cold climate, because it's going to be your final layer, and this layer has to be a wet application. That means that instead of just misting it on, you actually have to apply it in such a way that it creates this wet build-up of the paint, because otherwise you will not get the shine like normal auto paint. You will just get a kind of a foggy final layer on top of your base coat, and that's not what you want. So. Excellent. Next time the bumper comes off and we'll do some facelifting.